All right. Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you are. I'm radio and TV personality Rob Pagetto. I'm in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, where it's a beautiful 13 degrees. We're getting warmer, and that's Celsius for all of our Fahrenheit people. And I'm sorry, I gotta say this. Toronto Maple Leafs tied the Boston Bruins in the series last night. We're 1-1. We haven't beat Boston since 1959, so this is important. On the other hand, I'm going to be introducing to you to some people from LA and just saying the Oilers from Edmonton crushed you guys last night, 7-4. And unfortunately, Deborah, the Red Wings are not in the playoffs this year, but
Ah.
we're getting closer. So in Toronto, as I mentioned, I'm a radio and TV personality, and I love having a bit of fun when we're doing these webinars. So I'm going to be guiding you throughout the next half hour to 45 minutes through some questions that you'll be able to participate with online. And then we're going to look at those results, and then our panel is going to comment on those results. So let's meet our panel right now. Steve Delgado from Symtrax, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Steve Delgado from Symtrax. We are a data and document management company. I've been at this company for 7 years, so I have seen, a lot of our customers move from doing a lot of stuff manual to mostly automation with our assistants. But when I'm not working, I always love to go and maybe go out dancing, go out and have some fun with my kid, and yeah.
I like the personal touch. You're a dancer. I love it.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I love going Saturday nights, going to go salsa dancing or bachata whenever I can.
All right. Well, let's stay on the West Coast in California. Go over to Symtrax's David Ibarra Martin.
Thank you, Rob. Pleasure to be here, everybody. My name's David Ibarra, and so basically, um, I am also a data and document management solutions consultant at Symtrax, same as Steve. And like Steve, I like dancing. I just happen to not be very good at it, right? But ultimately, yeah, personal flair. I had a background in computer science and user UIs, yeah, UX, user experience. And, I chose to work here at Syntrax because I really believe that they have a great ability to really connect with the user base with fast and fluid just solutions. And I just love being here.
All right, I'm moving over to Detroit, where I believe the weather's probably similar because we're right along the same path. Deborah R. Richardson, who is also part of IFOL, and she just has a wealth of knowledge in this industry, including fraud. Deborah, how you doing today?
I am doing great. And yes, we are going to be 63 degrees, which I think Fahrenheit, that's a little bit higher than your 13 degrees Celsius, but still all in the same thing. We're definitely not California weather. We'll put it that way. But I am a certified fraud examiner. I've been in the AP P2P space for a little over 20 years. I really focus on vendor setup and maintenance, and I really talk about how to avoid fraud, how to avoid fines, staying in compliance, and just avoiding overall bad data in your accounting system and ERP. So I work as a trainer at IFOL and as well as a consultant and speaker. So hope to see anyone on at a future in-person conference. They're coming up.
And for everybody
Sweet.
joining us, this is being taped, as you probably know. So you'll be able to get a copy of this later on as Tracy kind of edits things and puts it together. All right, let's get moving. I'm just going to wait for the screen to pop up. We're going to get into this. We'll have 3 questions, and then we'll go throughout the panel to find those answers. And I'm just waiting for here we go. So today, as I mentioned, we are going to have 3 questions. And this first question is pretty simple. How do you receive your electronic invoices? Please click one of these. Is it a single centralized mailbox, directly to an invoice receipt portal, or to multiple team member mailboxes? So click one of those, and we're going to get the results in just a moment. Steve, you said you're a dancer. You're in California. Are you a
Yeah.
hockey fan, or are you more just salsa dancing around?
Yeah, I mean, I'm more into sports when, things are in the finals. So,
Oh,
I'll watch
you
the
jumping
Kings
on the
play.
wagon, are you?
Yeah, I guess, I just enjoy having a good time with everybody else. I don't really follow too much sports. I mean, I do see basketball, baseball here and there. But yeah, I'm more into like going into the parks and going to see what activities they have, or, night markets, things of those natures.
Excellent. What's the weather now in Cali right today?
Yeah, actually, we have very gloomy weather. We recently had high weather, like high in the 80s, 90s. It already feels like summertime here. Today, however, feels like it's like Deborah said, about 67, maybe, 69 or so, or 68.
Just a couple of degrees higher. All right,
Yeah,
here's our
exactly.
answers. So 63% of you said you're using single centralized mailboxes, zero directly to an invoice receipt portal, and 37% to multiple team member mailboxes. Steve, why don't you talk about those numbers real quick? Single centralized mailboxes is winning the race with 63%.
Yeah, I mean, so I think when I've seen, at least from these numbers, a lot of companies use single centralized mailboxes. Like for instance, their accounts payable. A lot of invoices go to this specific invoices, and then from there, it really depends on the company and their policy, how they like to handle it. Whether, they have a team of 3 people looking at that mailbox, and then from there deciding, who gets to choose what, or if there is some sort of system in the background that handles those invoices and takes that to the next step. Yeah, and so I mean that kind of touches upon that same multiple team member mailbox. Again, this may be one single centralized mailbox can be can be viewed by multiple team members, and in that fashion, again, just continue on with that second process of their policy, obtaining the invoice, and now what do we do with it, right?
David, do you find those numbers alarming in any way, or is that kind of the norm?
I mean, yes and yes, it is alarming, but it also is the norm, right? And the reason why I believe that it's alarming is because while I absolutely do think that, simplicity can be beneficial, and I mean, what's simpler than, the tried and true system of receiving mail via an email inbox, right? It's essentially cutting out and doing the next best thing to how we used to do things, right? Receiving it directly via the post office, directly via the mail. But it is alarming in the sense that there is and there can be, especially when it comes to multiple people, multiple mailboxes, the more you kind of split the responsibility. And you probably saw this when you were in school, right? When you were kind of doing group projects, you would assign and you would delegate, oh, this person's going to do this person's going to do that. Ultimately, what's going to end up happening, and I'm not saying it happens with everybody, maybe, some of our audience members have a really good system and where that just doesn't happen, but sometimes stuff falls through the cracks and somebody marks something as read or unread, and then the others think, okay, well, so and so's handling it. And then next thing you know, you have an invoice that hasn't even been touched and it's been 20 days, So not completely surprised by the numbers, but it ultimately can be a little alarming to know that that's still kind of what's taking place.
Deborah, what do you think?
So it's not surprising at all, but what I will say is those 37% that have what's probably a distribution email, so it's probably going to an AP at whatever company.com, but it's being distributed to multiple team members. So just like David said, right, it can cause some issues. So those 37% really need to get it to a centralized email inbox. So it's all coming in one and everyone's working from the same inbox. However, I recommend that they then all move to a collaboration portal. And that is just because email, as we know, is just so risky with fraud, social engineering scams, right, that come through and really having the risk of clicking on a phishing email, or having to deal with a fraudulent invoice or a fraudulent request to change remittance details. All of that happens in email. Not to mention the fact that now you have to deal with handling and processing those invoices via email. And I have been there, right? Color coded to death, right? The emails. And that is something that is just a very manual process, and there are issues that can go wrong with it. With that, not to mention the fact, what I also see is that a lot of centralized email boxes handle both invoices and vendor supporting documents, which means that now you have everybody that can see what could be vendor sensitive information that are included on those documents, like W-9s or their banking information. So, I get the emails. I've been there. I've done that. If you're those that have that, distribution email going to multiple team members, really move that to a centralized email box. But really, the goal is to move that to a collaboration portal, so you avoid the fraud that is just inherent in email.
Safe to say the more eyeballs on these situations, the better, because then other people can catch them.
Correct.
All right. Interesting. Okay, let's move to our next question. So again, we'll ask you to click one of these. How does your AP function analyze and input invoice data? Select one again, please. Mainly manual data checks and input. OCR for scanning them, manual check. AI is used for extracting data and checking for anomalies. So please click one of those. And while we're waiting, let's go over to David. So David, have you always lived in California?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I think I've been very blessed. I think that's kind of the case with a lot of people that kind of are born and raised in California. They tend to like not leave if they can avoid it. And I mean, as of now, yeah, I've been here all 26 years of my life, and
Oh,
I've
really? You had to throw
yeah.
that in there, right?
Oh, snap. Sorry.
Puppy.
Yeah, I'm just trying to prove the point, right? That I mean, who knows where I end up in the future, but for now, absolutely, yeah, definitely love the South Bay as we call it down here, and I mean, I've been
You
told
surf?
that.
Do you
I'm
surf?
sorry.
Do you
No,
surf?
no, I missed out on that class. We did have a surfing class, but I preferred my mathematics, and so yeah,
I
kind of missed
like
out on that one.
I like it. All right. So as the results come in, we'll go through the panel again. So we're looking at 57%, mainly manual data checks and inputs. 29% of the OCR for scanning them manually, and AI is used for extracting. So it seems, we've been doing these webinars for some time, and AI is starting to
Okay.
Hmm.
increase in numbers. What's your thoughts on that, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of where we're heading just in general. Like, it's not just invoicing, right? I mean, it's in your daily lives. Now you have Gemini from Google that helps you just search whatever you want. Same thing with Facebook. But getting back to the point, I mean, I think that number is just going to get larger, right? The AI number of people using AI to run invoices, purchase orders, scan the documents, is just going to get bigger, because really takes off. It really takes out the manual tasks of you having to, scan your own, using your own eyeballs to scan. And with me, with my glasses, maybe I have to adjust. I have to make sure it's on, my contacts are on, whatever the case is. I have to make sure that all that information is there. If I have another invoice, not all invoices look the same. So, you have to take a look at them one by one, while AI will help you just grab the important details that you need, like the invoice total, the purchase order number, the vendor information, banking information, all of these things that, kind of Deborah mentioned. AI can help you review all of that data before it even goes to that next step. So, I mean, I think it's a wonderful thing that's helping humans just make our lives easier. It makes us just review things rather than just be, typing in numbers and kind of, I'll just keep it at that.
David, manual processing had the highest numbers there. People still aren't switching to AI. Do you think it's because of lack of education, or they're worried, they're scared, it's something new, unfamiliar?
I mean, all of the above, probably. I think ultimately it's not up to a lot of the end users to decide what it is that, how businesses are run. I know a lot of times people come in and they have a lot of ideas as to how to innovate and modernize. And, a lot of young blood wants to modernize, but, the old guard will say, hey, this is how we do things. This is, you don't know the realities of running a business. And ultimately, what we've seen is as we work with customers is the ability to modernize and kind of show them, I think it's just a matter of perspective and showing them the possibility. I think AI can be scary, especially like in the news and with pop culture, right? AI, Terminator, whatever. But ultimately, it's AI can be, I think, to make it put it into perspective a little bit, it should be considered as like the next step in the same way that OCR was adopted and kind of became the norm in the 1970s and 80s. I mean, it's going to be the same with AI. AI is brand new and but it's going to be the norm. It's just a matter of time. 20 years from now, it'll be the new OCR, right? It'll be the new way of doing things.
Deborah, we know in past conversations that AI helps with, knocking down fraudsters.
Yeah, what I really like about it is that so you don't have to rely on seeing, right, that change or seeing, different banking or remittance information on an invoice. AI can look at that invoice and identify, right, whether it's coming from the same email address as before or a different email address. So now that could be a red flag that it's a fraudulent invoice. Not to mention, right, it can identify whether or not the information, vendor information on the invoice as compared to the information in your accounting system or ERP is the same. And so that can be a red flag for fraud, but not just for fraud. It can also alert you to the fact that, yeah, maybe the vendor did make a change and didn't tell you. So now you're getting in front of what would be, if you didn't catch it, right, a fraudulent payment that now you have to go back and void and do a lot of rework to get the updated information and reissue that payment. So it can do a lot to avoid not just fraud, but also unsuccessful payments from vendors that don't think to tell you, right, that their information has changed. Or maybe they did think to tell someone, but they told the internal team member and then it just never got to AP. That happens all the time.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct, Deborah. And maybe I kind of am interjecting. I do apologize, Rob,
No,
but
no.
I think AI is it takes into account the context. In the same way that a human has the ability to look at the context, it differs from OCR because it's looking at everything. It takes everything into account the same way that we do, but just at a faster, and it doesn't
Yeah.
get tired.
Yeah, and if you think about the volume of invoices that we're all looking at, it's just harder to spot.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Thank you, guys. All right, let's get to our last question. Which do you feel is the biggest risk for your AP function? Again, please choose one. Unauthorized vendor detail changes, or manual data entry errors, or finally, duplicate payments. So very interesting answers here to choose from. Deborah, you're in Detroit, but you traveled the world spreading the word on fraud. So many things, we've had so many discussions, and some of the numbers are astronomical in terms of companies losing money because of these fraudsters.
That is true. And I just want to say, though, that when we hear about it in the media or press releases, it's all about the millions and millions, right? But it's not. The fraudsters are really going after those lower amounts. So, if you're an attendee here and you're thinking, well, they're not after my, $100,000 payment or whatever, the latest report from the FBI is that business email email compromise, the average loss in 2023 was $137,000, which means they had some losses that were lower than that, which means that all companies of all sizes are at risk for fraud.
It's crazy. It's happening every minute of the day.
Yes.
All right, let's get to our answers. So again, that question, which do you feel is the biggest risk for your AP function? 52% was our largest number, manual data entry errors, and a tie for second was unauthorized vendor detail changes and duplicate payments. Manual data entry errors. Steve, that's where it's at here.
Yeah, I mean, I think just, Symtrax, since I've been here with Symtrax for so long, I've seen this issue just come up not only just with AP, but I mean, I think all around, where, that manual data entry is one of the biggest key factors in helping a company move to automation, really. There's gonna be an issue where somebody gets tired, right? They're doing a bunch of manual data entry. Their whole day is really just taking a bunch of invoices and putting it into their system. And so of course they're gonna make a mistake here. Maybe they'll miss a comma when it should have been a zero or something. They're just gonna miss a comma, a decimal point. Maybe they'll add an additional zero by accident. These things do happen. And I think in all of these three categories, Syntrax just really helps a bit by bit, right? AP automation, of course, is has a lot of points that can that might be daunting for a company to say, hey, I want to automate the reception of the invoices. I want to automate being able to grab all of the data, and I want to, automate what the manual data entry is. So, we help all along the steps. We don't have to do it all in one. We could just do it little by little. And I mean, I do see here that, same thing with duplicate payments and unauthorized vendor detail changes. These are data entry errors regardless, right? Because there's different vendor details. And somebody's going to come and try and input this into their systems, maybe unknowingly, right? Because it's also hard for them to keep track of. Maybe they have 100 companies that they're running their invoices with, and so keeping track of all of the vendor details isn't, it's very hard to keep track of for sure. Same thing with duplicate payments, right? Maybe you've worked on an invoice today, that same invoice comes tomorrow, but maybe you don't, because you've run 100 invoices in a day yourself. It's gonna be hard to keep track of that duplicate payments. So I mean, I see all of these as big risks, but of course, manual data entry is just the biggest one because it's just human error, of course.
Human error, David, like maybe you were out salsa dancing that night before and you're a little tired the next day and bang,
Yeah.
here you go. So you've got vendor detail changes and duplicate payments tied for second as well. So this again looks like they're pushing to AI.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I saw this distribution, I mean, I basically felt the same way because I was trying to put myself in the shoes. Which one would matter most to me? And I mean, it's difficult. It's a difficult choice. So I don't think any of these are incorrect. I think ultimately, as Steve like rightfully pointed out, it all kind of stems from the same place where it's just the labor can be intense. Having to check all of these, there's a bunch of different points at which one can fail, and so it's important to ultimately get a system, a solution or that is able to basically make sure that all three of these are and more are taken care of. And that's where a lot of automation can help, not with what's it called, touchless AP. I don't think touchless AP is the way to go. I think straight through processing, right? I think you need to have an AP team that can basically increase the amount of invoices that are processed straight through with less lag. And yeah.
Deborah, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think some of these are just connected, right? So we've got
Yeah.
the highest with the manual data entry errors, but that can also lead to duplicate payments, right? Because we've been there when that manual data entry, right, that results in a duplicate invoice just ends up being a -1 or a -A or whatever, just to get the invoice to post because it's the right invoice and definitely not a duplicate. But oh yes, it is a duplicate, right? And duplicate payments in themselves can be, right, a data entry error, or it could be an indicator of fraud. So definitely duplicate payments really is an issue, but eliminating those manual data entries goes a long way to avoiding duplicate payments and really to also avoiding unsuccessful vendor payments too. I know we talked about, or the response here is unauthorized vendor detail changes, but they're manual, right? Manual changes to vendor data, that is just a fat finger, right? Resulting in unsuccessful payments. So what we really want to do is make sure we're getting that information out of email, and then also making sure that that information is updated in the accounting system or ERP on an automated basis, so that you don't run into these manual data entry errors, which could result in duplicate payments and bad vendor information. Also, with the automation, we don't talk about it a lot, probably not enough, but internal fraud, right, is always a risk as well. And once you automate, right, the ability to then create invoices by these internal fraudsters goes down. So that potential reduces because now those invoices must go through that automated process. So an internal fraudster should not be able to create an invoice in the system or bypass approval. So lots of things that you can avoid really by automating the collaboration and integration with the AP system versus manual data entry.
And you did touch on a point. Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
No,
Rob.
go ahead, David. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, and Deborah, you did touch on a point that we've been talking a lot about automation, but ultimately, collaboration is really where it's at, right? I think oftentimes there's a sense of ownership and there's a sense of, oh, okay, no, I need to take care of this, and this is my, but it's a team. And so I think a platform like ours really does help with the collaboration aspect, which is to say, hey, I need to send this out to somebody else. And luckily, there's a list of requests that I can send, and the ability to automate that in and of itself, the automation of receiving requests, completing them, and then sending them to the next person. And that really is another big piece that we have found helps our customers kind of turn net 30s into net 15s or even net 7,
Deborah, it's funny because you read my mind. I wanted to talk about internal fraud briefly because aside from, watching somebody pull up in a brand new car every other month, are there helpful hints in, detecting internal fraud?
So the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, every 2 years, they do a report called the Report to the Nations, and it's all on occupational fraud. And 2024 is is one of the 2 years. So they just came out with their report probably about a month ago, and they have, and I can't remember them all, Rob, but they have an infographic, or just within the report, of 8 behavioral red flags of internal fraudsters, and pulling up in the newest car is one of them.
Oh, wow.
That's not how they put it, but it's the lifestyle change. But you never, or maybe you won't be surprised to hear that gets missed a lot. And so I would recommend anyone listening to this on demand that you definitely check out the Report to the Nations, and you check out the infographics that they have and all of the information that can help you identify an internal fraudster. There are 8 behavioral red flags, and living above one's means is one of them, but that's also the one that gets missed the most.
Deborah, with internal fraudsters, I believe an audit trail, an audit trail would kind of be the way to go, right? Just having sort of an automated system that audits everything would kind of eliminate that, because you're ultimately able to find it.
Absolutely. And one of the things that the ACFE says is that the biggest weakness is internal controls. And so if you have manual internal controls, you're relying on those things to be done. And that is one of the biggest reasons why they say that fraud happens, is because those things don't happen. And so if you automate them, it happens.
They're going to happen. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Really, really interesting. Steve, any final thoughts at the topic at hand?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just to kind of cover all the points that we talked about, automating AP, again, is just a very daunting point, whether that's a basic step like, handling the invoices, whether it's what do we do now that we have the invoice, what do we do with this? I have to look at policy. Can we use AI or OCR to be able to grab this data? And then lastly, the automation of the integration part. It can be very daunting, any of these points. So Symtrax can always help with any of these points. We always say, hey, let's I think the best part, if you're looking to automate AP, is to start at the, doing something small. So why not, if you haven't done so already, you're still maybe doing physical copies of invoice handling, why don't you start off with digitizing that process or automating that invoice handling, and then get to that second step of, okay, now we have the invoice, what do we do? So doing piece by piece, I think, is a takeaway, right? You don't have to do everything all at once. Start off with either what's something that's easy to do, or maybe something that's very critical at hand that you have to do. It's mandated to do by your company.
Maybe
David,
the
over to you,
biggest
final
risk.
thoughts?
Sorry, Rob. Yeah, like I just kind of wanted to piggyback and say maybe like ultimately the first thing that you probably want to automate is what you feel is the biggest risk for your AP function. So however you responded, right, to that third poll question, whether it's the unauthorized vendor detail changes, the manual data entry errors, or the duplicate payments, just kind of focus on that and kind of, make sure to see what there is, see what can be done, and you'd be surprised by how simple some of these solutions can really be.
Deborah, final thoughts?
Yeah, so really the bottom line from the AP team member perspective, right? Automating the submission and handling of invoices, along with extracting vendor information needed for, invoice matching and payments, as well as integrating with your accounting system or ERP, just creates a collaboration that you just cannot get out of email and with the related manual processes. But also it upskills our AP team members from manual processing, right? That includes data entry, to reviewing for auditing, because at that point you're looking at exceptions only. So you're going from data entry to auditors. And that's what I like.
Excellent. Well, thank you, panelists. Steve, appreciate your time. I'll look for you on TikTok dancing salsa.
Yeah, exactly.
David, I appreciate that 70s and 80s reference as a 26-year-old. That means you've done some research.
That's all. That's exactly what it means. Yeah.
I love it. And Deborah, a pleasure always. Hopefully the Red Wings, because they just missed the playoffs this year. Hopefully next year we'll see you in the playoffs. Again, gang, I appreciate your time. This is taped. You'll be sent a copy of this. And I leave you with a few words of wisdom. All right. If your house is cold, just stand in the corner. It's always 90 degrees.
Okay.
There you go. I'll take that one.
That's a good one.
I'll take that one to Detroit.
I love it.
That's a good one.
Use that one all day. I'm Rob Pagetto. Thank you to IFOL, and we'll be in touch. And keep an eye out for future webinars, because obviously they're very educational, and we've always got a great panel.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.